Thus far in this lesson on Live Trace, and by now I think you know I like this feature, we've brought images in, selected them, and clicked the Live Trace button. Illustrator gives us its default of a black and white type of image, which that's okay. But if you don't like that, obviously we have the ability to click this button right here and go into any one of about a dozen presets. For example, we have used grayscale, and Illustrator is more than happy to give us its version of a grayscale kind of posterized image, and that's okay too. Let's go into one we haven't done yet, like say color, and go color 6. Adobe Illustrator, again, its version of color. Now there's nothing wrong with that, but if all we had were those dozen presets up there, this would be a very limited feature in Adobe Illustrator, and obviously we can make our own. When you're working with presets, you have really two things you can do. Minimum area, sometimes you get threshold, or sometimes you get maximum colors. That's all. If you make your own, you get a whole lot more options. To make your own, you click this button right here. That button is your gateway to making presets in Live Trace. The tracing options give you the ability to fine-tune your own preset and then actually save it with a name, and it will then appear in the preset list. Let's look at some of the options that we have. Number 1, presets. You can change to one of the presets and then use that as a mask or as like a template to do your own and start from that point. We'll leave it at color 6. Let's turn on our preview too so you can see the changes. The modes, you've got 3. Color, grayscale, and black and white. Some of my students will ask, how come this is never on and how come these are always grayed out? Well, it's because you've never gone into the mode black and white. That's the only place you're going to see those. Black and white deals with fills and strokes. You also have a threshold. Threshold determines how much of the image goes black and how much goes white, so we can change that. We can come over here and turn off the fills and go into strokes. And as you can see, we get more of a sketch look if you want to. You have maximum stroke weight and then minimum stroke length, and you can control what you see by using those options. Let's go back to color. When we're in color, we get a palette. Say, what's that for? Well, to control the colors in the image. And you say, well, that's all I get? I got a button and there's no options. You have to set this up. We have to actually get out of where we are. So we're going to cancel out of here for a second. Go into your swatches panel. In your swatches panel, you actually have an option on the lower left that allows you to open other color swatch panels. For example, let's go into art history and do Baroque. That sounds good. And let's close it. You don't have to leave it open. And we'll go back again and let's try celebration. We'll just open those two and then close them. They do not have to be open. But when I go back and click that same button again to get into my tracing options, let's move that up here. You will notice my palettes are now Baroque and Celebration. What do? They remap the colors in the image based on those color palettes, and you can make your own if you want. Let's turn the preview back on and try them out. Let's start with, well, let's try Celebration. Let's see what this does. I don't know, psychedelic, I guess is a word I'd use for that. Let's try Baroque and see if it's any better. Changes and remaps the colors to the Baroque panel. Actually, that's not that bad. Let's go back to automatic though. Notice these things are down. They're grayed out. Okay, let's go back here. Automatic, they'll come back. We can change the maximum number of colors, and that goes up to 256. We can output the colors to our own individual color panel if we want to do that. Blurring is to replicate the natural effect of a photograph. Vectors are cut and dry. The numbers that I would put in there to change to make a photograph, even though it's a vector, look still more like a photograph, wouldn't be much more than a 0.2 or a 0.3. But sometimes I vary that depending on the image. If we slide down here, you've got something called resample. And this allows you to resample the image during the process of converting it. We're going to leave that off. Over here, path fitting, minimum area, and corner angle. Think of all three of those this way. The lower the numbers you insert into those areas, the more complex the image is going to be. If you're looking for something photographic, then you want the lowest numbers possible. Ignore white basically is areas, if we had a box around this image, maybe we just had the flower and not the background, it would ignore all those white areas, which is exactly what you'd want it to do. These two buttons down here for raster and vector have the same features as these two that are up here. What you want to do is set it up and experiment. Now you got to watch that preview button, because if you're doing something really complicated, it takes a long time for it to redraw it. Sometimes what I do is I'll turn that off. Then I'll make changes, like maybe add a few more colors. I'll change my path fitting, maybe change my minimum area. Let's go ahead and change that to like a 4. And we'll change our corner angle to about a 5. Then I turn it back on, because if you don't, every time you make a change, it will redraw, redraw, redraw. It takes forever. Let's click preview and see what we've got. It'll take a little while to do it, but some images can take 10 minutes or longer to actually redraw. And watch the image, because it's going to change. It'll be more complex, beginning to look a little bit more like a photograph. We now have 11,000 paths in this image, 73,000 anchor points, 35 colors, 9,000 areas. That's a lot of stuff. You can't really do a whole lot with images like this in terms of printing them. The more anchor points, the more complex. It's very easy when you're using Live Trace to get to a point where you really can't print. I really do like it when I'm working in sketches, things like that, but complicated photography still, in terms of printing, is beyond what this thing can do for you. But if you like it, you click Trace, make it permanent, and there we go. If you want to take it into Illustrator now, you'd click the Expand button.